The world held its breath as news broke of a direct phone conversation between former US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. After months of escalating tensions and bloodshed in Ukraine, the two leaders found themselves once again in a position to potentially reshape the geopolitical landscape. Details of the call, which took place on February 12, 2025, remain closely guarded. However, sources confirmed that the primary focus was on reigniting stalled peace negotiations. The Kremlin, in its usual terse fashion, stated that the two leaders had exchanged views on the situation in Ukraine and agreed to continue contacts. Meanwhile, a statement released by Trump's office painted a more optimistic picture, emphasizing a shared desire to find a peaceful resolution to the ongoing conflict. The announcement also revealed plans for a face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin, with Saudi Arabia touted as the likely venue. This unexpected development sent shockwaves through the international community. Many questioned the timing, coming as it did on the heels of a particularly devastating Russian missile attack on the Ukrainian city of Poltava. Others expressed cautious optimism, hoping that this renewed dialogue, however improbable, might pave the way for an end to the bloodshed. The elephant in the room, however, was the conspicuous absence of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from these preliminary discussions. This omission, deliberate or otherwise, immediately raised concerns about the true nature of the negotiations and the potential price of peace. The exclusion of Zelensky from the initial stages of the Trump-Putin dialogue did not go unnoticed in Kiev. Ukrainian officials expressed their disappointment, with some going so far as to label it a betrayal. The optics, after all, were undeniable. Two powerful leaders seemingly dictating the fate of a nation without the direct involvement of its elected representative. Zelensky himself, however, struck a more measured tone. In a televised address to the nation, he acknowledged the concerns but urged calm and restraint. He revealed that he had spoken with Trump shortly after the latter's call with Putin. While details of their conversation remain confidential, Zelensky described it as productive and focused on coordinating next steps in the peace process. Adding further intrigue to the situation was Zelensky's characterization of Trump as a strong man uniquely positioned to exert pressure on Putin. This seemingly deferential language, a stark departure from the Ukrainian leader's previous criticisms of Trump, fueled speculation about potential backroom deals and concessions already made. Despite the reassurances, a palpable sense of unease settled over Ukraine. The specter of a negotiated settlement that favored the aggressor loomed large. The question on everyone's mind was simple yet profound. Could peace be achieved without Ukraine having a seat at the table? As the world grappled with the implications of the renewed Trump-Putin dialogue, the Biden administration found itself in the unenviable position of navigating the fallout. While no longer in the Oval Office, Trump's actions continued to cast a long shadow over American foreign policy. Adding fuel to the fire were statements from key figures within the Trump camp regarding potential concessions that might be on the table. One particularly contentious issue was the question of Ukraine's borders. Trump himself had repeatedly questioned the wisdom of restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity to its pre-2014 status, echoing Putin's claims that Crimea was rightfully part of Russia. These sentiments were further amplified by Trump's former Defense Secretary William Barr, who in a recent interview dismissed the idea of Ukraine regaining control of the Donbas region as unrealistic. This stance, if adopted as official U.S. policy, would represent a significant departure from the Biden administration's current position of supporting Ukraine's right to self-determination within its internationally recognized borders. Equally concerning were pronouncements regarding Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO. Both Trump and his allies have long voiced their opposition to Ukrainian membership in the alliance, citing concerns about provoking Russia. This view, however, ignores the legitimate security concerns of a nation that has been repeatedly invaded by its larger neighbor. The Biden administration, for its part, has maintained its commitment to NATO's open-door policy. However, the public pronouncements from the Trump camp, coupled with the ongoing negotiations with Putin, have injected a significant degree of uncertainty into the equation. The potential for a negotiated settlement in Ukraine has also brought into sharp focus the question of U.S. military and financial aid to the embattled nation. Since the start of the conflict, the United States has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. providing billions of dollars in military hardware and humanitarian assistance. However, recent reports suggest that this support might come with a hefty price tag. According to sources familiar with the matter, the Trump administration is pushing for a deal that would see continued U.S. aid tied to Ukraine, granting American companies preferential access to its vast natural resources. These resources, which include fertile farmland, mineral deposits, and potentially lucrative natural gas reserves, have long been coveted by outside powers. The Trump administration, with its emphasis on economic nationalism and America First policies, appears keen on leveraging the current situation to secure favorable terms for American businesses. This proposed quid pro quo arrangement has sparked outrage in some quarters, with critics accusing the Trump administration of exploiting Ukraine's vulnerability for its own gain. Others, however, argue that it is simply shrewd diplomacy, ensuring that American taxpayers see a tangible return on their investment. Regardless of where one stands on the issue, the fact remains that the potential for a peace deal has opened the door to a complex and potentially ethically fraught debate about the true cost of peace. Section 5. Actions speak louder. Russian strikes cast a shadow. While the world watches the unfolding diplomatic dance with bated breath, the situation on the ground in Ukraine remains volatile. Despite engaging in peace talks, Russia has continued its military offensive, albeit with a renewed focus on strategic targets. The recent barrage of ballistic missiles aimed at Kyiv, a stark departure from the relative restraint shown in previous months, served as a chilling reminder of the Kremlin's capacity for violence. The attack, which resulted in one fatality and numerous injuries, sent shockwaves through the Ukrainian capital. It also cast a long shadow over the nascent peace talks, raising serious questions about Russia's true intentions. Was this a show of force intended to bolster Moscow's negotiating position? Or was it a sign that hardliners within the Russian military establishment remained unconvinced by the diplomatic overtures? Adding further fuel to the fire was a separate Russian airstrike that targeted the Poltava region, a key natural gas-producing area. This attack, coming on the heels of reports suggesting a potential deal linking U.S. aid to access to Ukrainian resources, fueled speculation that Moscow was intent on crippling Ukraine's economic prospects, regardless of the outcome of the negotiations. These recent military actions have injected a sense of urgency into the diplomatic efforts. The international community has been quick to condemn the attacks, with many expressing concern that they could derail the fragile peace process. The question now is whether these actions represent a negotiating tactic or a sign that Russia remains committed to achieving its objectives through military means. Section 6. The world reacts, cautious optimism and calls for inclusion. The news of renewed peace talks between Russia and the U.S., spearheaded by Donald Trump, has elicited a mixed bag of reactions from the international community. While the prospect of a negotiated settlement to the bloody conflict in Ukraine is welcomed by most, concerns linger about the process and the potential for a lasting peace. The United Nations, through its spokesperson, expressed cautious optimism, emphasizing the need for a cessation of hostilities and a political solution that respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The statement also stressed the importance of involving all relevant stakeholders, including the Ukrainian government, in any negotiations. European leaders, while echoing the UN's call for inclusivity, expressed a more reserved stance. German Chancellor Annalena Baerbock emphasized the need for strong security guarantees for Ukraine as part of any peace deal, a clear reference to past failures to deter Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron, meanwhile, stressed the importance of a just and sustainable peace that addresses the root causes of the conflict. The underlying message from European capitals is clear: any attempt to impose a solution on Ukraine without its full participation and consent is doomed to fail. The legacy of the 2015 Minsk agreements, which proved largely ineffective in ending the conflict in eastern Ukraine, looms large over the current negotiations. Section 7. The Polish incident, a momentary blip? As if the ongoing negotiations and the shadow of Russian military action weren't enough, a recent incident involving Poland has added another layer of complexity to the situation. A Russian military aircraft briefly violated Polish airspace, triggering a flurry of diplomatic activity and raising fears of a wider escalation. Polish authorities were quick to scramble fighter jets in response to the incursion, which Moscow attributed to a navigation system error. While the incident was resolved peacefully and without any casualties, it served as a stark reminder of the heightened tensions in the region and the potential for miscalculation. NATO, of which Poland is a member, convened an emergency meeting to discuss the incident. While the alliance ultimately accepted Russia's explanation, the incident highlighted the precarious security situation in Eastern Europe and the risks inherent in operating in such close proximity to a volatile conflict zone. The timing of the incursion, coming as it did amidst the backdrop of the Trump-Putin negotiations, fueled speculation about its potential impact on the peace process. Some analysts suggested that the incident could be interpreted as a warning shot from Moscow, a reminder to the West of its military capabilities and its willingness to defend its interests. Others dismissed it as an unfortunate but isolated incident, unlikely to derail the ongoing diplomatic efforts. Section 8. The stakes remain high. Charting the path forward. With so much at stake, the path towards a peaceful resolution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict remains fraught with challenges. The renewed dialogue between Trump and Putin, while offering a glimmer of hope, has also raised serious concerns about the direction of the negotiations and the potential price of peace. The exclusion of Zelensky from the initial stages of the talks, coupled with the Trump administration's apparent willingness to link aid to access to Ukrainian resources, has fueled fears of a negotiated settlement that favors the aggressor and leaves Ukraine vulnerable to future Russian pressure. The recent Russian military actions, including the missile attacks on Kyiv and Poltava, have further complicated matters, casting doubt on Moscow's true intentions and raising concerns about the sincerity of its commitment to a peaceful resolution. The international community, while cautiously optimistic about the renewed diplomatic efforts, has also stressed the importance of inclusivity, transparency, and a just and lasting peace that respects Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The stakes remain incredibly high. The outcome of these negotiations will not only determine the fate of Ukraine, but could also have far-reaching consequences for the future of Europe and the rules-based international order. Section 9. A fragile hope, can peace prevail? As the world watches with bated breath, the question on everyone's mind is whether peace can prevail in Ukraine. The renewed dialogue between Trump and Putin, however improbable and fraught with challenges, offers a glimmer of hope in what has been a long and bloody conflict. The path forward is undeniably treacherous. Mistrust runs deep, and the scars of war are still fresh. The potential for missteps, miscalculations, and outright sabotage remains high. Yet the alternative, a protracted conflict that spirals further out of control, is simply too horrific to contemplate. The weight of history hangs heavy over these negotiations. The ghosts of past failures to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, from the Budapest Memorandum to the Minsk agreements, serve as stark reminders of the fragility of peace. The international community must remain united in its support for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, a peace that respects the country's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and right to determine its own future. The alternative is unthinkable. The time for diplomacy is now. The future of Ukraine and indeed the world may very well depend on it.